We've talked about food freedom. Now we need to figure out how much land it takes, not really land, but how much of a garden it takes to produce the majority of your food. So on this channel, we don't really focus on producing 100% of our vegetable intake. We focus, hopefully the goal is around 80% or so. It is cold right now, so everything is locked up tight, and we are not opening this billy goat for a couple days, couple more days it seems like now. But I can tell you right off the bat that this is not the size garden that you need in order to produce the majority of your food. Matter of fact, you'll probably be pretty surprised because it's not just the size of the garden. Yeah, I know, I hear the jokes coming, but it's the techniques that we use in the garden to really maximize our space and to get as much as we can out of it. So we're going to go over a couple different things, and I'll give you a few examples, and we're going to have to use our imaginations because I'm not opening the garden, but I'll try and explain it as much as I can. This persistent cold has really taken a toll on what was left of our rutabagas and these few radishes here. So this bed is done, but I wanted to show you this because it really applies to this conversation, in which all of the beds this time of year aren't 100% packed, right? So as we get into spring, we'll pack more and more in, and the beds will be uniformly fully planted. You know, as of right now, what we're looking at in my garden is just like pieces and parts of what's left. But that's really important because we did something a couple years ago with the garden. This was before we really, this is right around the time that we really started hammering in, you know, planting earlier and kind of getting on the ball with our timing, which is super important. But so the garden, like this bed, for instance, right here, I think that year we had 4 beds here, and they were all planted to some extent. And this was right around probably February to March. And it was like, you know, we'd have a row here, and a row here, and 2 rows here, and you know, this bed was full, something to that effect. But when you took it all out, and if we combined it all, it would have been in 2 garden beds, okay? 2 4x8 beds. And so what we were able to pull out of there was astonishing. You know, we got probably 30 heads of lettuce. We got about 15 pounds of carrots, and we got about 20 pounds of white potatoes, a handful of broccoli, and probably about 10 cabbages. And so that was just 2 garden beds, right? And that was in 1 season. So you can really get it in there, but we've got to get these techniques under control and really hone them in. And this isn't something, we were doing our garden meeting, which if you want to be a part of, become a member. It's I think it's the 2nd Wednesday of the month. We do a private video conference chat, but we were talking about it. First technique is going to be your spacing, okay? So spacing is really, really important. And if we look in here, I showed this bed a lot, so we'll go to this bed. The only reason why I'm using these is because the door is open. And if we look in here, I mean, this is very much so not appropriately spaced, but you can see that we really have things packed in here quite tightly. If you pack them too tight, what you'll do is you'll lose your ability, your plant's ability to produce large produce. You don't want to pack it in too tightly, but what we want to do is you want to be able to look at a plant and figure out how much space does this plant need, okay? Now every plant, you can go through the books and figure out piece by piece in each one, and I recommend that you do that. But as you get more and more into it and you start doing it more and more, you'll start to really kind of get a grasp of how much you can put per square foot in your garden, right? So smaller plants like carrots, you can put, I think it's like 16 carrots per square foot, okay? Bottom line is, think about how a carrot grows. It grows straight down and the greens grow straight up. So you can pack them in, right? Now take broccoli for an example. Broccoli doesn't grow that way. Broccoli likes to spread its little wings, so you got to give it space, right? But it's not just space up top, it's space underground as well. So for instance, broccoli. those roots go down and then they spread out, where carrot just goes straight down, radishes straight down, garlic straight down, cabbage spread out, tomatoes spread way out, you know. So all of these different things make a difference. Corn is another great, when you can pack a lot of corn in a small space because it gets tall, but the roots don't really spread out very far. They're pretty concentrated. So how do you learn about the roots? Well, pull up your plants, harvest it, pull it up and see what happens, and look at the roots and see how much of the roots spreading, and you'll be able to start picking up on this piece by piece. Next piece to the puzzle is timing. So timing is super important. It's one of the things that I talk about. I would say it's the most on here because timing is important, and everything is way off when it comes to timing. We've just been trained badly about it. So if you think about it, starting seeds right now, and I know people are like, hey, it's cold outside, and yes, I'm in coastal North Carolina. Welcome to Sandy Bottom Homestead. Today it is, I believe right now it's 29 degrees outside, and it is plenty chilly. The high is going to be like 38, I think. So it's hard to start seeds right now. Nobody really wants to do it. Well, you want to do it, but you think it's too cold. But when we were having our meeting last night, I was talking to one of the gentlemen in there, and I said, you know, he's somehow, I believe, I don't know, I could be wrong, but the conversation kind of came up where it was like, it may be a little bit too early. And I said, well, think about it this way. And as a viewer, think about what I'm about to say. When you walked outside today, what are you wearing? You know, right now I'm wearing two shirts and a heavy coat and some gloves and a toboggan. Yeah, it's a toboggan. I know, that's how we say it in North Carolina. But in 8 weeks, what am I going to be wearing? I'm probably not going to be wearing this coat, and I'm not going to be wearing gloves. And the moral of the story is it's going to be a lot warmer in 8 weeks, which is generally speaking how long you're going to grow your seeds for. So if you start them now, and in 8 weeks, it's going to be, to an extent, warmer. Everybody's going to be coming out of this cold period. We're all going to be getting into our last frost dates. We're going to be marching towards them. In 8 weeks from the filming of this video, it's going to be March 8th. That means I have 45 days from that time until my guaranteed last frost date. And that means that every single thing that's in my garden right now can be replanted plus some by then, if not before then. So if you start thinking about it that way, timing is super important, because if I get that broccoli in there, my target date this year for my broccoli, cabbage, and potatoes are all within the first 2 weeks of February. The way that should look, bed will be all potatoes, and this bed over here is going to be all broccoli, and this bed's going to be all cabbage, right? So if you look at that and we say we put it in around, let's just call it even February, let's be generous, say February 14th. That means by May 1, everything in these garden beds here will be out, and then this bed will be out by June. So if you look at it that way, we are only going to be 2 weeks past our last frost date, and then we can replant all of this with a full season to go. And so we're maximizing every single inch of this garden bed. Not to mention this garden bed we can empty it whenever. Right now we're not harvesting from it because I don't want to open it, but once it's opened again, we're going to go in and we're going to harvest everything we can out of it, and then that's going to be completely ready to be planted, and that's going to have all lettuce and then kale and kale and collards in it. And so once the lettuce is up, we'll cut everything out, and then again by April 15th that bed will be completely emptied, and we can put stuff in it all over again. This bed right here is all Brussels sprouts. They should be getting close to being ready to be harvested. I don't know because I can't look at them. I'm super anxious actually. But if that happens, then they will all be harvested right around the middle of February to early March. And then April 15th, all squash is going in here. The other part of it too is, for instance, this bed, which is going to be all squash, when all of the squash are producing and they start, when I get my first squash off of it, I'm starting another round of squash. So then when these start, because squash don't last forever, I'll pull them out and then I'll put them back in, and then I'll be able to get 2 whole squash crops out of here. So you can see this bed right here will be planted 4 or 5 times throughout a calendar year. So you can really get this stuff in there and get it out instead of waiting until it gets warm. And really it is too late to plant a lot of this stuff. I mean, how many of you have had broccoli bolt? How many of you have had lettuce bolt? Well, if it's bolting, it's because of the heat. So we need to take that stuff out and get it in when it's cooler so it can grow and get harvested before the heat gets to it, right? So you've got to beat the heat, and your plants are telling you, you planted me too late. They're screaming it. Last year, and this bed was the first year, because we planted earlier and we fed heavy, we got a 100% broccoli harvest versus our usual 20 to 30% harvest. 100%, and it was all because of the timing. So the other thing that's really important, and if you've been watching the channel for a while, you know that in my garden, there is not an extreme diversity of plants within my garden. There is a diversity. We do try to grow all of our food groups as far as plants, proteins, carbohydrates, minerals, fibers, all that stuff. But as a whole, we keep it as simple as we can and grow as much as we can of the things we know we like to eat and we eat a lot of. So that's really important too, because if you think about it, and you're growing all this crazy stuff that you don't even know if you like, and you may harvest it once, be like, and then toss it. I know you got to try it in order to see if you like it, and you should always leave space in your garden to experiment. But when it comes down to it, we need to know, hey, this is what we really like. Let's grow a lot of it, because when you start doing that, then you can really pack those plants in, and the spacing will be uniform, and then you can grow it throughout and then get that amount that you want, and you can be filling your tummies. I mean, look here. I got my championship belt, you know what I'm saying? I earned that because that's how we grow it, We grow what we eat. Now, we always, like last year, I grew the popcorn. So tired of popcorn, but whatever. And it was fun to do, but when I sat back and looked at it at the end of the year, for what I got, I wasted a 4x8 bed to get a handful of popcorn. And when you think about that, I could have gotten so much more out of there. I could have gotten pounds of food out of there, of anything you think about. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze by any stretch of the imagination, but it was what we did. We tried it, but keep going forward and take that note and say, you know what, it didn't work out. And the other thing is, for a bed of popcorn, now remember, I'm saying popcorn, not corn, but popcorn. By the time you harvest it, you get maybe a bag of popcorn, like of kernels. You can get that for $2 at the store, where I could have gotten 10, 20, 30 pounds of tomatoes out of there, or 15 pounds of peppers out of there. And I mean, it doesn't make sense to do that. So know what you like to eat and plan accordingly for it, and you will be rewarded with more space and more production out of a smaller garden. You think the cat's gonna go in there and lay down in the warm? Or you think she's just gonna sniff? I don't know. Wuss, she walked away, she didn't know what she's missing. But the other thing to do is know how you're going to use your produce, okay? And preserving is a really big part of this. Canning, freezing, dehydrating, fermenting, you name it. And go into the garden season knowing what you plan to do with it. Don't figure it out as you go along. You can see in this bed, there's cabbages in there. And so we eat a lot of cabbage as well, but we will take the cabbage, and we'll definitely see, cabbage is a really good one because it stores for a long time. So we'll eat probably 15 heads of cabbage, and then we'll take 5 heads of cabbage and we'll make sauerkraut out of it. Not only will we do that, but we'll make soups, and we'll freeze them, and it'll have the cabbage in it, and we'll do all kinds of stuff like that, and then we can enjoy it throughout the year. So you don't have to eat it fresh all the time. And I mean, look, I know fresh food is better, but you know, if you're going, so right now my family and I, we're not eating out at any restaurants until March 1st. And first of all, it creates a whole lot of dishes, which kind of sucks, but it saves us a lot of money. But when you're doing stuff like that, and it goes time for you to get something, you need something to eat quick, and you pull that soup out of the freezer, it's a game changer. And it's all stuff that you've grown. You know, our tomatoes, so we grow, usually we grow 2 to 3 types of tomatoes. And one of them is aroma tomato, which is basically solely for canning. The other one is a slicer, which we can still have the option to can. And then another one is a cherry tomato, which we will dehydrate, and we will use those in throughout the year. Usually 2 plants of dehydrated tomatoes will last us over a year. So we can use that throughout, and then we can use that to supplement as we need to. So all of this matters, because a lot of times what happens is we'll grow food, we won't know how to use it, and then how many times have you tossed there it's gone bad? And that's not what we want to do, because it's too much work. Bring you in the greenhouse, 1, because I'm cold, and 2, because the lettuce here is really important, because variety makes a huge difference. So this is all romaine type lettuce. Now you can always grow iceberg lettuce, but there's 2 issues with iceberg lettuce. 1, it's not my favorite, I don't like it, so that doesn't matter. Really, it's a personal preference. But 2, you can do cut and come again on this, right? So you can cut the outside leaves, let the middle grow, come back, cut it. If you have a row of, let's say in here, I probably have 5 lettuces in one of these little rows. I have, I think, 3 rows. So I can harvest 1 row, all of them, get a salad for a day or 2, come back, you know, enjoy them throughout that week, however we see fit, come back, do the next row, enjoy it that week, come back, do the next row, and then start over again on the first row. So we can do stuff like that and really enjoy it longer. And the cat did go into the greenhouse, into the tunnel. That's funny. Oh, she's taking a crap in there. Go figure. So anyways, that's disheartening to hear. I have to go in there and clean it up. But knowing your variety matters, and knowing your space. So if you grow in a small space, don't get the biggest variety possible, right? Like if you have a 4x8 bed, why would you grow a giant pumpkin in it? You know, yeah, you may get a lot of, and you don't really eat giant pumpkins, but let's just use this as an example. But you know that it's going to take up a lot of space, so get a smaller variety. You know, there's bush type varieties, there's all kinds of different varieties you can get. There's smaller produce varieties. And one of the things that I've realized is the smaller the final fruit outcome is, the more you get off of the plant. So one year we grew Tabasco peppers, and I'll never grow them again because I could not keep up with harvesting them. Yellow pear tomatoes are super popular, and we grew those, and same thing, we just could not keep up with the produce of them, so we don't grow them anymore. It's just too much to it. So, you know, when you get the smaller ones, the smaller fruits on them, that is what's going to give you more produce as a whole than if you were getting, you know, giant tomatoes. You get big tomatoes, but you don't get the numbers and the poundage. Well, the poundage probably equals out now that I think about it, but you get what I'm saying. So pick your varieties accordingly and use that to your advantage. I'm gonna focus on this Brussels sprout bed for a minute, because I think it's time that we have the conversation. I think it's time that we go and we start dabbling in the dark arts, and we talk about hybrids or heirlooms, okay? Now, right off the bat, I can hear people clacking away. No, hybrids are not genetically modified food, okay? Hybrids are a result of crossbreeding different plants in order to get the traits desired to fit the need of the desired product. I know it's kind of weird to say, but that's really what a hybrid is. And so I talk about this with my Brussels sprouts because we struggled for a long time to grow Brussels sprouts. And what we did is we were growing heirlooms. And then last year I grew a row of heirloom and 2 different rows of hybrids. And lo and behold, what grew? The hybrids are the only ones that grew, and they had the traits in there to help, you go in that direction and to produce more, right? So hybrids a lot of times will hands down outproduce heirloom seeds, night and day difference. Now the difference is the seed's not necessarily stable for saving, so it's kind of a crapshoot if you're going to be able to save the seed. But I'm not saving, hell, I could barely grow a Brussels sprout. Why do I need to save a Brussels sprout seed? You know, I'm not saving a broccoli seed. You know, if I want to grow a hybrid and I want to get a bigger head of broccoli, grow a hybrid, I'm not saving the broccoli seed. I have saved them, but typically the way I look at it, if I'm going to focus on an heirloom, and this is a recent development over the past couple of years, I'm really going to focus on something in which I take the produce, I harvest it, I cut it, and then I pull the seed out of it. If I harvest the seeds from something that bolted, that's just a bonus. Like I'm like, hey, I messed up, let me get the seed. Like I don't usually let it stay for that purpose. When you get into different types of hybrid seeds, you can go crazy with the traits in them, and a lot of them are space saving, a lot of them are higher producing, pest resistance and all that. Now pest resistance, why is that important? Disease resistance, because if you get a seed that has a resistance to it, first of all, it doesn't mean that it's 100% going to happen. So let's just be very clear about that. As a matter of fact, it doesn't happen a lot, but what we do know is that it has a tendency to be resistant to such issue. Right? And so when we're planning our garden out and we're figuring out what's going in each one of these beds, we can say, hey, we don't have to plant as much because we have the protection of the hybrid trait within it. So for instance, my green beans got mosaic virus and they all went boo-boo last year. Well, if I had one that was resistant to mosaic virus, guess what? I have a higher chance of keeping them. I may have lost some of my crop, but not all of it. You know, when you stand in this garden bed, it doesn't seem like a lot of space, but there's a lot of space in this bed. And if you can eliminate a couple plants out of it because you have some kind of resistance, then it is well worth it for you to do that. I don't stand in my garden bed much, but I really felt like I was breaking the rules there. It felt weird. Now the last piece is a cheat code. Okay, so last year I grew a Seminole pumpkin on this trellis. It grew up, over, down, came out to there, and then another piece branched all the way through here, all the way around and out. Now that pumpkin gave me about, I think we got out of one plant 50. We had 2 plants, so we got about 70 pumpkins last year, Seminole pumpkins. That's a big deal, but why is that a cheat code? Because it only took a square foot of the garden up and then just was in the grass. Whatever, you know, so anything that's trailing or vining, plant it on the edge of your garden and let it go out. I plant my sweet potatoes in one bed and let them all go out. I don't care about the grass, whatever, dude, I'll just cut it or, you know, whatever. It doesn't matter. So just let those trailing plants go out. So circle back all the way around. And now let's answer the question. How much of a garden do you need to feed yourself, your family, the majority of the food for a year? Okay, how much does it take? Okay, so an average family is what, 4 people? I would venture to say, if you do it right, you need somewhere between 4 to 6 4x8 beds. And if you take it and you just plant in ground, then you almost add another 25% of growing space in, because you're planting in ground. So don't always think you have to go raised bed. There's a lot to that, but again, the bigger space you have, the easier it is, by all means. But if you do it right and you start small and you are methodical and you plan out the way that you're doing it, you're going to be very surprised about how much food you can get out of a small space. And then you're on your path to food freedom. Right? That's what we talked about in the last video. So think about that. Think about how much it takes. But again, we're not focusing on 100%. We're just focusing on the majority, which is about 80%. And You have to pick and choose, you have to cut here and there, and you have to be very on point and understanding of how it goes. And you're not going to get it right away, but you're going to learn over time, and each year you're going to get better and better. And what you'll end up with, if you made a big garden at first, once you start honing it in and really getting down to it, you may end up sitting back one day and be like, my garden's too big. Then what? Time to plant some flowers.